Good evening, Dr. Laus. Tonight, I will be presenting to you my instrument development presentation. And in this presentation, I will discuss the rationale for my instrument and the steps that I took to develop this instrument. The name of my instrument is the Brief Counselor Self-Efficacy Preparedness Trauma Scale. And the rationale for this instrument is to evaluate rehabilitation counselors' perceived self-efficacy and their preparedness when working with veterans living with trauma, transitioning from active duty to civilian life. And my rationales for that. My rationale for this instrument is that studies have shown that every 1 to 4 veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan will be living with PTSD. And because rehabilitation counselors specifically often work at agencies such as the VA or more so Veterans Affairs, I think that having a screening tool that recruiters or educators can use for new entry rehabilitation counselors or new students um, that want to study rehabilitation counseling and want to specifically work with veterans, this will be able to gauge their self-efficacy and their preparedness for working with this targeted population. Furthermore, as we know, trauma can affect how a person interacts with other individuals, their work life, their home life, and their interpersonal relationships. Furthermore, I think that gauging a counselor's self-efficacy and their preparedness shows how confident they will be when working with this targeted population. And because the war in Iraq has been going on for so long, even though it quote unquote has ended, I believe that the after effect in civilians as well as veterans, the rehabilitation counselors that serve this population need to be as confident as possible in their preparedness to successfully serve this population. So initially what I did was look for different instruments, scales, assessments that spoke specifically to trauma, to preparedness, and to self-efficacy. And furthermore, to instruments that identified with working with veterans. And the instrument that I came across that I felt would help support the development of my own was the Counselor Self-Efficacy Scale. And upon looking at that instrument, it discussed different domains that spoke specifically to counselor self-efficacy and their ability to deliver clinical skills. And upon reviewing that instrument, I decided to create my own instrument slightly similar. So my instrument has one construct and 3 domains. The overarching construct is rehabilitation counselors' self-efficacy, or rehabilitation counselors' perceived self-efficacy in their preparedness. So overall, I want to gauge how rehabilitation counselors, um, how high is their self-efficacy in their preparedness, and then specifically, how prepared do they feel when working with veterans living with trauma, transitioning into civilian life. So the 3 domains that I created within my instrument were one, competency of trauma and trauma-informed care. The second domain was self-efficacy of rehabilitation counselors' preparedness when working with veterans. And then 3, my third domain was challenges for veterans transitioning home. And excuse me. So once I developed these domains, I created 9 questions in each domain that all spoke to specific um, clinical behaviors that a counselor would need to um, describe what was their level of self efficacy in being able to deliver this specific service. So once I developed my instrument, I I contacted an instructor of a master's level course who also served on my expert panel, and I was able to disseminate my instrument to a master's level class for the content and face validity. Um, Also, within that class, there were three doctoral students. So, having a mix of two rehabilitation counselor educators, um, three doctoral students, and four master's level students, I was able to gather different perspectives from, in my opinion, experts that could look at this instrument and provide feedback, regarding if they felt that each item would measure what it was intended. So upon receiving that feedback, I found that three of my questions or three items on my instrument needed to be revised, and once revised, that those items would be efficient to serve as items on this instrument. Furthermore, I think that developing this instrument, it would be a good useful tool to for again for recruiters and educators to screen new entry level rehab counselors that want to work specifically with veterans transitioning from active duty to civilian life. Um, so I did complete an IRB. However, I have not been able to test my instrument for reliability. However, I think that using this instrument, or more so using this instrument for my dissertation, would allow me time to critique and develop this instrumentation and to see its full potential. I think this was a very um, informal assignment. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to go through the process of developing this instrument. Um, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity. Have a good day.